Many people, looking at the work of simple cleaners or hospital orderlies, regard them with contempt. Although we are taught from childhood that all jobs are valuable and all professions are important, some even manage to utter an insulting phrase, such as, "If you weren't smart enough to get an education and work a decent job, you have no right to complain." Some people fundamentally do not respect the work of cleaners. They deliberately walk on freshly cleaned floors, throw trash right on the floor, and think, "What's the problem? She's being paid, so let her do her job." That may be true, but why behave so rudely? The person has already done their job for which they are paid and has cleaned everything up. And you are intentionally littering. No one in the world is obliged to clean up after you. Next time you see a cleaner at work, don't rush to stomp on the clean floor with dirty shoes. Apologize and walk around the edge if you really need to pass. Moreover, life shows that not all cleaners are women who lack intelligence. Perhaps she has a sick mother or child at home, and this schedule and free time suit her. For example, this is what happened with our heroine, Amanda, who is the subject of today's story. She was certainly not lacking in intelligence, but she was forced to work as a cleaner. Moreover, Amanda had a higher education. Let's start from the beginning. Meet Amanda, the daughter of a millionaire, or perhaps even a billionaire, in short, the richest person in our city, John. From childhood, Amanda lived a life of luxury, lacking for nothing. The only thing she missed was maternal care. It so happened that John's wife, Amanda's mother, died during childbirth. The woman gave life to her daughter but left this world. Unfortunately, such things happen sometimes. Neither an expensive private clinic nor a whole team of highly qualified doctors could cope with the complications that arose during labor. Childbirth is a very difficult and dangerous process. No matter how well you prepare or how much you pay doctors, just one little detail can lead to irreversible consequences. Amanda's mother didn't even have time to hold her daughter in her arms. She was gone in just a few seconds, a rupture of the brain's aorta. Who could have guessed that she had an aneurysm? Unfortunately, such things are not always diagnosed in advance. They only discovered her problem at the moment of tragedy. It was a miracle that she even carried her daughter to term. But the mother was gone, and John was left alone with a tiny, squeaking bundle. From the very first second, he hated this child as soon as he was told that his wife was no longer alive. But as soon as he took his daughter in his arms and looked at her wrinkled little nose, all the hatred immediately evaporated. John didn't really believe the ultrasound results and secretly hoped for a son. He dreamed of naming him after his grandfather, Adam, and awaited the arrival of Adam. John wanted to pass on all his business to him, to continue the legacy planned by his grandfather, the very same Adam. And so, instead of an heir, a girl was born. With that, the hope of having another child disappeared, for there was no longer a wife. Following tradition, John did not come up with anything new and named his daughter Amanda. He had been waiting for Adam but ended up with Amanda. Well, that was something to live with. John raised his daughter in the best traditions, with tutors, ballroom dancing, and the most prestigious educational institutions. Amanda received her education abroad. By the age of 22, she was ready to take over the management of the family business and send her father into retirement, or at least to a consulting position. However, despite her excellent upbringing, Amanda was completely devoid of vanity. With all her qualities, she was not a spoiled golden girl who could kick open doors to any office. Surprisingly, the girl turned out to be gentle, pliable, calm, and accommodating. She had no reason to rush. Her father was still young and perfectly capable of managing the business. She decided to take her time observing, gaining experience, and understanding the specifics. After all, work and management abroad were significantly different from those at home. There was no need for Amanda to strive for a career. She had not come from the street. She was the only daughter of the owner, and sooner or later the entire inheritance would come to her anyway. One could say she was born on the very top rung of the career ladder. So, there was no sense in hurrying. Moreover, Amanda had fallen in love. Mark turned out to be a wonderful young man, fortunately from the same circle. He was the son of one of John's partners. They had been introduced as children when both families met abroad. Back then, the parents joked, when they grow up, we'll marry them off and merge our businesses. We'll have a family merger, pass the business on to the young ones, and we'll retire, settle by the lake and go fishing. In her childhood, Amanda had been horrified by Mark, especially by his name. "What kind of name is that?" she used to say. However, after returning from abroad, at a reception her father hosted, she could not take her eyes off the handsome young man. "Who is that?" Amanda asked her father. "That's the one you used to shy away from in childhood," John chuckled. Mark turned out to be gallant, polite, and thoughtful. The young people started dating, and their relationship gradually blossomed into true love. Eventually, Amanda fell head over heels for him. So, right now, she had no thoughts of managing the company. She dreamed of getting married. Amanda wanted to become Mark's wife, have a bunch of children with him, and only then think about business. Moreover, if the agreement about the merger between their parents still held, it was likely that Mark would manage everything as the head of the family. Amanda would be more than happy to take care of the home and raise the children. Perhaps that's how it would all turn out, if not for the arrival of Brittany in their lives. After his wife's death, John held on for many years and did not even entertain thoughts of remarriage. Perhaps there were women in his life, but no one had ever seen him publicly with anyone. John became a confirmed bachelor with an impeccable reputation. But over time, looking at his grown daughter, he remembered his youth and suddenly realized that he was not that old yet. Before Amanda and Mark made him a grandfather, John decided to seize his chance. Everything happened as in the old saying, gray hair in the beard, devil in the ribs. Neither his daughters pleased nor the opinions of others had any effect on him. John insisted on one thing: he had the right to be happy, and no one was allowed to interfere in his life. Those who tried to convince him otherwise he added to his enemies' list. Gradually, almost all his close ones turned away from him. After the engagement, Amanda moved into her father's house with Mark, and there were less than 6 months left until their wedding. But then John decided to outpace his daughter on a spirited horse. He would marry Brittany first so that at Amanda's wedding, he could present himself as a husband and wife, meaning as a father and second mother. Not a stepmother, he insisted it be mom. Brittany was only 5 years older than Amanda. This was what embarrassed everyone the most. It wasn't that they decided to start a family, but the age difference. Just think about it. No pensioner with a meager pension gets to meet his love in the form of a girl who is 40 years younger than him. And no young girl marries an older man who has a room in a communal apartment. Love, as it turns out, is a strange thing. It comes selectively, only to those who have businesses, villas, yachts, and money. John, of course, was not yet an old man, but the 25-year age gap embarrassed not only those around him but Amanda herself. However, her father listened to no one. He wore rose-colored glasses and had bananas in his ears. They got married and were very happy for exactly 1 month, which they spent in the Canaries. Upon returning to America, the young and beautiful Brittany revealed herself to be a legally savvy woman. Don't ask how, but she filed for divorce and left John literally with nothing. The love-struck man made a fatal mistake, in his haste to become the husband of such a beautiful girl, he signed the marriage contract without looking, believing it to be a standard formality. For several days afterward, John wandered around the house in complete despair, not understanding how it could have happened that he lost everything. How could he have been so blind, naive, and intoxicated? Even that was a complete disaster. He would have to vacate the premises within 2 weeks. Vacate? Where? Where was he supposed to go? He had suddenly become poor and destitute. Where would he live now? Under a bridge? Oh God, oh God! What a disgrace! He was found in his study. John took his own life, leaving a note asking for forgiveness from his daughter. Amanda could not calm down. She couldn't understand. Why did Dad do that? Why did he leave her alone in this world? Wouldn't Mark and Amanda have helped him? After all, he could have lived with them. There was very little time left until the wedding. Amanda wept at her father's funeral in pain and despair, still unaware of the disappointment that awaited her in the future. When it turned out that there was nothing left after John, and nothing to inherit, she too became poor and destitute. Mark ruthlessly called off the engagement. A penniless fiancé did not fit into his wealthy family. Where had his gallantry and courtesy gone? He simply kicked her out of the house and onto the street. And where will the beggar, who Amanda has now become, sleep? What was she to do? Amanda rented an apartment, but the money in her account was dwindling. It had never been much to begin with. Her father did not find it necessary to save money for his daughter. Why? The tax office might consider it income concealment. Besides, she was his only daughter. Very soon, Amanda realized that if she didn't find a job, she would end up under a bridge. No one would rent her an apartment for free. She tried to find happiness in one company or another. She submitted applications and sent out resumes. But no one was waiting for her, despite her brilliant education. It became all too clear. Amanda had once been the daughter of a rich man, and now she was nobody. With her father gone, so was his influence. This meant that her diplomas and certificates no longer interested anyone. "We don't need people without experience," they told her mockingly. The only place that accepted Amanda without any issues was as a cleaner. There, no one cared about her education or whose daughter she was. She just needed to wield a mop and expertly handle a rag. That was all. Amanda chose to work at a children's hospital. At least it wasn't as dirty there. Plus, cleaning among children was much better than in a public restroom at the train station. She wasn't ashamed of her work and felt no embarrassment. Amanda loved children, and even as a cleaner, she could interact and talk with them. "I should have studied to become a caregiver or a teacher," she thought. "Then I could work in a kindergarten or a school." But alas, she had a completely different education, which turned out to be useless, except for her father's firm, which no longer existed. All of this seemed so distant, as if from some past life. And yet, being a cleaner turned out to be not so bad after all. She had plenty of free time, which she spent with the children in the hospital. One thing was unfortunate: the pay was low, and she had to move from a rented apartment to a rented room in a communal flat. Thus, our princess found herself at a broken trough, with a broken heart, without a father, and without means of support. Almost overnight, the life of the little daddy's princess was turned upside down and became like some terrible and joyless dream. Now Amanda lived in a large communal apartment, where every corner was occupied by someone's belongings or people. Her personal space was limited to a tiny room that she could use for herself. The room felt lonely and dreary, with a small window overlooking a street that offered nothing appealing or comforting. Instead of being the head of a firm, Amanda now worked as a cleaner in a hospital where she not only had to clean but also sometimes care for the patients. The work was hard and exhausting, and Amanda often returned home feeling drained and upset. But what tired her most was not the physical labor but the emotional burden. There were so many sick children in the world. Every day was like the one before. Amanda's day began early in the morning when she left home and walked to work. She was saving money on transport. Her route took her past fences and walls that separated her from the wealthier neighborhoods of the city. Her worn-out clothes and tired appearance made her invisible to those around her. Her friends had stopped communicating with her. She no longer matched their status. The only people with whom Amanda maintained any contact were her colleagues at the hospital. During breaks, they engaged in brief conversations, but everyone was as poor and tired as she was. Their talks revolved around mundane matters. Communication brought no joy. Amanda's life had become dull and joyless. One day, she noticed a little girl about 5 years old in one of the wards. Amanda had not seen her before. Likely, the girl had been brought in recently. The child looked very sickly and unkempt. She lay on a cot without bedding. Her head barely rested on the pillow, and the girl was carelessly covered with an old, worn blanket that resembled a rag more than anything else. Her face appeared pale with a bluish tint, indicating a fever and probably pain. Her eyes were closed, and her lips were dry and tightly pressed together. The girl was breathing heavily, drawing air through a congested nose. Her hair was carelessly braided, probably done several days ago. There were stains of dirt on her face and the sleeves of her clothing. Her clothes looked worn and dirty, with torn pieces of fabric hanging down like evidence of the hard times she had endured. Her arms and legs seemed weak and barely moved. Her entire appearance suggested that she belonged to the group of those whom life had made outcasts, just like Amanda had now become an outcast herself. The surrounding environment in the ward only intensified the sadness. Everything looked uncomfortable and poor, underscoring the girl's hopeless situation. The ward was small, with beige walls and empty shelves adorned with images of children's toys. The lighting was uneven and cold, either due to one of the fluorescent lamps being broken or because the hospital generally had electricity issues. The floor was made of old wood, with visible cracks running through it. On the floor and walls were scattered or hung various medical supplies, infusion stands, oxygen masks, thermometers, and other instruments. It seemed like some kind of storage room, cluttered with junk. The ward had several beds intended for patients, but all of them were empty. In other rooms, the children were in better conditions. Perhaps it really had once been a storeroom that was repurposed for these unwanted and forgotten children. The atmosphere in the room was quiet and tense. There was not a single item that could comfort a child, no toys, no books to cheer up the little ones. This was where the saddest, most depressive environment reigned. Everything felt dull and uncomfortable. Amanda herself did not understand why she suddenly felt drawn to one of the girls. Perhaps she sensed a kindred spirit in her. The girl was as lonely and abandoned as Amanda herself. No one came to see her, neither during the day nor in the evening. Maybe this girl is from an orphanage? Amanda thought. She asked the nurse what her name was and found out that the girl was named Lena. Lena is a beautiful name. Usually, children in orphanages were given simple names. A beautiful name like Lena could only have been given by loving parents. Maybe something happened to them? Maybe they died? Amanda pondered. She wanted to take care of Lena. She often sat next to her, smoothing her hair and spreading it over the pillow, wiping the sweat from her forehead, sometimes offering her boiled water with cupped hands. But the nurses noticed this and kicked Amanda out of the room, roughly telling her to mind her own business and not to interfere where she wasn't wanted. Strange, Amanda thought. When she helped other children, the nurses didn't care what she did. But here, there was suddenly such a reaction. Amanda decided to pay closer attention to Lena. She had become very attached to the girl, perhaps because she reminded her of someone from her past. Amanda recalled the tragedy that had befallen her father. A woman had deceitfully taken all his wealth from him, leaving Amanda not only without possessions, but also without a father. He had died. Amanda had been pregnant at the time, but she found out about it shortly before her wedding to Mark and decided not to say anything, planning to make it a pleasant surprise after the wedding. But after her father's death came Mark's betrayal. This was a blow to her. Amanda had a nervous breakdown and fainted right in the street. When she woke up in the hospital, the doctors informed her that she had lost the baby. Ironically, they added that she could have had a daughter, a pretty blue-eyed girl. Amanda had intended to keep the child despite her difficult situation and poverty. But the doctor said, it's probably for the best that it happened this way. No need to create more homeless children. Amanda nearly struck him in the face for such words. After being discharged from the hospital and regaining her composure, she began looking for a job, preferably one related to children. She was tormented by a sense of guilt for not being able to save her child. She just wanted to help other children, to give the love and care that she had been unable to give her daughter. Some women, after such tragedies, lose interest in children and sometimes even resign from schools or kindergartens. But Amanda was different. Anger and hatred were foreign to her. She felt an even stronger pull towards children, wanting to surround each one with care. For this, she was even nicknamed Mother Teresa. However, she understood that with her small salary and a rented room in a communal apartment, adoption was impossible. No one would give her a child. You're still young, you can give birth yourself, some said. But Amanda couldn't. After the betrayal, she couldn't stand men. She saw a potential deceiver in every one of them. Mark and his family, whom she had known since childhood and considered almost her own, had treated her cruelly. Since then, Amanda was sure she could trust no one ever again. One day, she became curious about Lena's family. Looking at the girl's file, she was surprised to find that there were no details at all, no information about the mother or father. Is she really from an orphanage? Amanda thought. Once, when the nurse turned away, Amanda sneaked back into Lena's room. The girl was lying uncovered. Amanda adjusted the blanket and then started to fluff the pillow. Suddenly she felt something prick her finger. "What is this?" she gasped. "Oh my God, this is dangerous." A sharp pain pierced her finger, and everything swam before her eyes. She barely held herself up, but realized that it was the effect of poison. Amanda immediately recognized the symptoms. Once, while studying abroad, she had learned about such poisons. They were used to neutralize an opponent or pursuer. It was enough to dip a pin in a vial of poison and discreetly prick the victim. For a few seconds, a person would lose consciousness or feel severe dizziness. Judging by what Amanda felt, this was exactly that poison. But she was an adult and managed to withstand it. What could happen to a 5-year-old child? Now everything became clear. It was this poison that kept Lena in a critical condition. But who could do such a thing to a small child? Who could dare to act like that? It was remarkable that even the weapon of the crime was right at hand, saving time on searches or the risk of stumbling upon it. The perpetrator simply left the pin stuck in the girl's pillow. She wasn't a spy and wasn't planning to run away. In fact, she couldn't have. So who could have done this? Clearly, it was someone who could freely enter the girl's room. That could only be either Lena herself or the nurse. Amanda decided that she had to find out who was doing this to the child and why, no matter what. At that moment, she heard footsteps approaching the ward in the corridor. Amanda noticed a small door, presumably leading to a storage room or a closet cluttered with junk. She hurried there, and fortunately, the door was not locked. Amanda quickly slipped inside and froze, waiting. If the footsteps passed by, she would leave. But if not, perhaps she would be lucky enough to see the villain. By the way, the room where Amanda had hidden was not a storeroom, but just a small built-in closet. In other words, such closets were used to store equipment, mops, buckets, brooms, and dustpans. Amanda was quite slender and slim, but she barely fit in this closet. Suddenly, she overheard a conversation between two women. One was a nurse, and the other was apparently neither a doctor nor a nurse. "I'm 100% sure," the nurse said. "Here's a new batch of poison." "Wrap this up quickly," the woman said. "I need to get rid of that little brat. Then her father will be in a daze from losing his daughter and will sign all the documents I need. I'll become the sole heiress, and another fool will lose his fortune to me." "Yeah, I suspected stepmothers could be nasty, but not this much." "I'm seeing this for the first time," the nurse replied. "I'm not paying you to come up with guesses, but to help solve my problems," the woman interrupted the nurse. "I don't owe you anything," the nurse retorted. "You only promised, but you haven't paid. So, when you pay, then you can start giving orders." "Oh God, how much longer are we going to talk?" the stepmother exclaimed, stuffing something into her mouth as if she had just eaten. "I told you, I'll get the inheritance and pay you everything." "And how am I going to get it if that little mouse is still alive?" the nurse raised her voice. "When you pay, then you can dictate terms. But for now, we're equal here. Stop chewing on those candies before you get diabetes, or you'll die without paying." The nurse placed the vial of poison on a shelf, cleverly masking it with other vials, and both women left the room, the sound of their heels clicking on the hospital's tiled floor echoing. Amanda sat in her hiding place, neither alive nor dead. It couldn't be. Fate couldn't have brought her together with this vile woman, this deceiver, this fraudster, who had left her without a father and without means to survive. She recognized Brittany, and judging by what she was saying to the nurse and what they were up to, the fathers of Lena and Amanda were far from being the first or the last victims of this insatiable witch. Something had to be done, but what? What could Amanda present as evidence? She had no proof. And it was undoubtedly Brittany. She couldn't be mistaken, and the main evidence was indeed the candies. Amanda found a wrapper on the floor that the woman, who simply loved sweets and devoured them without stopping, had dropped. Surprisingly, she didn't gain weight. She could eat 1 kilogram in a day and buy another kilogram the next day to devour again. The girl carefully rummaged through the empty vials on the shelf and found the one without any labels. This was undoubtedly the vial of poison. What a funny thought. Amanda rushed to the nearest store. She knew for sure that they sold the candies her stepmother loved so much. She bought some and asked to have them wrapped in a beautiful box. Then the girl took a syringe and filled the candies with that very poison from the vial she had just found. She didn't intend to harm the little one. They definitely wouldn't succeed. Amanda stuck a greeting from Brittany on the box of candies and sent it with a courier to the address indicated in Lena's medical record. Surely, Brittany lived there since it was Lena's father who was in the crosshairs. They needed to take over his estate. And even if the con artist wasn't there, they would know whom to pass it on to. Without her daily dose of poison, Lena began to recover. The nurses did their best, and someone even added pseudopoison in the form of saline solution to the girl's food. No one understood what was happening. None of the nurses could explain this phenomenon. Why was Lena consuming poison? It was intriguing to realize that everyone knew everything, and no one could do anything. They couldn't exactly say that they were poisoning a child, could they? Yet the child was getting healthier and healthier. In the end, the medical staff had to inform the girl's father that she was on the mend. So, Amanda, practically doing nothing, had saved Lena. Now no one forbade her from visiting the girl in the ward. Lena and Amanda became very good friends. The girl told her that once, a long time ago, so long ago that she couldn't remember, she had a real mother. But then she went away somewhere and never came back. Dad told her that Mommy flew to heaven, that she now lived there and looked down on them, because otherwise she would cry, and they would have rain. Well, you know, the girl leaned confidentially toward Amanda. I don't believe that. I behaved very well 100 times. And it rained almost all week, so my mom has nothing to do with it. I know what happened to her. She died. And who told you that? Amanda asked. My stepmother told me, the girl replied. She told me every time Dad wasn't home. She even took me to my mom's grave. I saw everything. What a horror! Amanda exclaimed, but thought to herself that this woman was capable of even worse treachery. I just don't talk about it so he doesn't get upset, the girl said, and then suddenly tears started to drip from her eyes. And so she doesn't do anything to Dad. My stepmother said I shouldn't tell Dad anything. Otherwise, she'll send him to my mommy, and I'm supposed to call her mom. It makes me feel so sick, the girl complained. Amanda literally felt her hair stand on end at what the child was saying. It was not enough to get revenge simply by filling the candies with poison that would, at worst, make an adult spend a few days on the toilet or just cause mild discomfort, like a cold. Soon Lena's father arrived. When he entered the room with his daughter, and his gaze met Amanda's, she nearly froze as if she had seen a ghost. The names of the parents were not recorded in Lena's medical file, only the address. Apparently, this was done intentionally so that no one would guess who her daughter was. Lena's father was none other than Mark, the very young man Amanda was going to marry. Such was fate. He had kicked her out when she became poor, and now she had saved his daughter. Now Brittany was already his wife. When she married Amanda's father, the families barely communicated. Mark knew that Amanda's dad had started acting strangely, but he hadn't seen his then-fiancée, who later became his wife, the one who ruined him. At that time, no one wanted to communicate with John, and Amanda alone visited her father's house after their engagement was broken off. Mark married another wealthy girl, who gave him Lena. Meanwhile, Amanda, overwhelmed by the grief that had befallen her, became withdrawn. It so happened that when Lena was 4 years old, her mother was in an accident and died. No one looked into why. It was simply that a wealthy brat lost control, and the brazen homewrecker, having taken all of John's estate, turned to a new victim, the suddenly widowed young handsome Mark. Everything would have been fine if not for his little daughter, who was ruining all of Brittany's plans to acquire a new inheritance. All these thoughts came together like a puzzle in Amanda's mind when she saw Mark in the doorway of the ward. "You? What are you doing here?" Mark asked, surprised. "I'm taking care of your daughter," Amanda replied. "Why is she lying in this dump?" Mark exclaimed. "Because your wife put her here," Amanda said, then told Mark the story of the pen and the vial of poison and what she did with the candies. It was amusing when she simply recounted those events. It was even a bit funny, but it was very sad for the girl. "Thank you," Mark said and suddenly hugged Amanda. I've missed you all this time." Amanda turned away so he wouldn't see the tears that had traitorously rolled down her cheek. She only just realized that she still loved Mark. Despite what had happened to her, despite his betrayal, she loved him. But that didn't make things any easier for her. "What if you had known in advance that she was my daughter?" Mark suddenly asked. "Would you have helped her?" Amanda turned sharply toward him in indignation. How could he think such a thing about her? What difference did it make who her father was? The child was innocent. "I would help any child in that situation, even the child of my enemy." "And who do you think her father is?" "You probably think of me as a traitor and a scoundrel," Mark suddenly said, seeing Amanda's tears that had not yet dried. "No, I don't know," Amanda hesitated. "I just don't remember anything, absolutely nothing." Mark was surprised. "What do you want, Mark? What do you want to hear from me? That I still love you?" Amanda was seriously angry. "I still love you, very much. But I also hate you just as much, do you understand? You kicked me out because of yourself. I just lost my father, I lost a child." Amanda shouted this and fell silent. She had sworn to herself never to tell anyone about her miscarriage. She wanted to erase those terrible days from her memory, to think that none of it had happened, that this whole story had just been a dream. But no, fate willed it to bring her face to face with Mark again and remind her of those events she had tried so hard to forget. Fate, that villainess, wanted to reopen the wound in Amanda's heart, which was already healing poorly. "What child?" Mark asked. "Before the wedding, I found out I was pregnant. I wanted to surprise you and tell you after the wedding, but my father died, and you kicked me out into the street. I lost our child. The doctor said it was a girl, a blue-eyed blonde, just like your daughter." Amanda could no longer hold back and began to cry. "If only I had known. If only I had known," Mark exclaimed, "everything would have been different, completely different." Looking for support, he leaned against the wall and squatted down. Mark held his head in his hands, running his fingers through his hair, and quietly groaned. What he had just learned from his fiancée struck him to the core and brought him deep emotional pain. She approached him and gently touched his head. She used to do that, just play with his hair between her fingers. "It wouldn't have changed anything, it would have been exactly the same," she said. "I forgave you a long time ago, if that makes it easier for you." Amanda turned to leave the room. Now Lena would be in safe hands. If Mark wasn't a fool, he wouldn't let Brittany near his daughter or himself again. "Wait," Mark said. "I didn't abandon you or kick you out." "Well, I did, of course, but I was forced to, you understand, I was simply forced." "Who could force you?" "You're an adult, Mark." "My father," Mark said. "He was afraid that after your father's death, you would become the head of the company and demand the merger we talked about." "I see," Amanda said, disappointed. "And the little boy listened to his dad." "Well, what's unclear?" "Just that you didn't know that according to the marriage contract, everything has already gone to my stepmother." "Who could have known that?" Mark countered. "And do you know who my stepmother really is? Who she actually is?" Amanda asked. "No." "What does that have to do with anything?" Mark didn't understand. "It means that Brittany is now your wife. Now she's after your inheritance and nearly destroyed your daughter. So, have a nice family life," Amanda said and was about to leave. "Don't go," she heard a thin child's voice. Lena had woken up from their conversation. "I want you to be my second mom," the girl said. Amanda rushed to Lena's bed, picked her up, and began hugging and kissing her. Of course, my dear. I will definitely be your mom." Mark took his daughter home from that awful place and hired the best doctors for her. Amanda agreed to stay with Lena. Although the amount of poison in the candies wasn't lethal, Brittany still ended up in the hospital with poisoning. There, she was taken into custody and informed that Mark was divorcing her. After a thorough investigation, Brittany was sentenced to prison for fraud and causing serious bodily harm. Naturally, she was stripped of all rights to the property that was supposed to belong to Mark. After her father, she regained her wealth. She no longer had to live in a communal apartment and could return to her own house, where she had lived with her father. But Amanda chose not to do that. She put the house up for sale. You can't step into the same river twice. There were too many memories in that house, and she wouldn't be able to live there. She would suffer from memories and the longing of understanding that things would never be the way they were before. Amanda decided to stay with Lena. She regained her wealth, status, and position, and in Lena, she found the child she had lost back then. Even in the hospital, she told Mark that she had long forgiven him, but that didn't mean she had forgotten. He would have to spend a lot of time for Amanda to accept him again and be able to trust him. Much of this was helped by Lena. Amanda saw how Mark treated his daughter and understood that despite all his flaws, he was a very good father. Amanda gave in 2 years after those events, and she and Mark got married. Their wedding was quite modest for people of their position and status, but that didn't diminish their happiness in any way. A year after the wedding, Amanda gave birth to a boy. They decided to name him after Amanda's father, John. Thus, love and forgiveness, a kind heart, and good deeds can work miracles. One must always leave at least a small piece of kindness in their heart and give people a chance to cope, especially if they themselves are striving for it.